Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the National Policy Dialogue on Climate Change Actions. With its emphasis on linking grassroots action to policy debate, upscaling, knowledge sharing, and science. We have an august gathering here today. On the dais, we have with us today Professor M.S. Swaminathan, Member of Parliament and Chairperson of the M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation. Ms. Florence Tingerli-Metley, who is the Charge d'Affaires at the Embassy of Switzerland, and the Honorable Minister for Environment and Forestry, Jairam Ramesh.
I wish to acknowledge the continued support, interest, and commitment of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, because Switzerland, as you know, has always been a great supporter of environmental causes. The very word development alternatives indicates it's a wonderful organization to show alternatives in development pathways so that you can choose one which is more sustainable. UNDP is another partner in this particular meeting. UNDP is also the coordinator of the UN Millennium Development Goals. The other partner is Watershed Organization Trust. The very word says watershed. They have done an enormous amount of work in the conservation of water and the sustainable management of watershed. The last of the partners in this is the foundation, M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation in Chennai. So the purpose is to provide inputs for the National Action Plan on Climate Change, which has 8 well-defined missions under the Prime Minister's leadership. And how do you provide? The other one, we are very happy that we have been wanting to see that this happens. Recently, when President Obama came, one of the agreements which was announced by him also in the joint session of Parliament and also by the Prime Minister is the monsoon mission. The monsoon mission has components like climate, not only more accurate climate forecasting, but also forecasting in terms of markets, in terms of crops. The other one that President Obama announced is the Evergreen Revolution, jointly between the US and India. Evergreen Revolution, which I defined 30 years ago as increase in productivity in perpetuity without ecological harm.
Climate change is indeed a great concern to the Swiss citizen, and we are therefore strengthening our bilateral cooperation with India on issues of common interest, namely adaptation to climate change, energy efficiency, and food security.
The challenge for us is really to integrate this top-down National Action Plan on Climate Change with this exercise that you have started, which you have initiated, a process by which you are putting together the shared experiences of communities to the impacts of climate change, and from that deriving experiences and lessons for what public policy should be doing. India is going to be the most profoundly influenced and affected by climate change. First and foremost, of course, is the monsoon. In spite of the fact that we are now a fast-growing, services-led economy, the fact of the matter is that if you look over the last 50 years, almost 45% of the variation in our GDP has come from variations in rainfall alone. The second point of vulnerability, as Dr. Swaminathan has said, is on the rise in mean sea levels. Almost 250 to 300 million people of our country live in the coastal areas along peninsular India, along a 7,000 kilometer long coastline, who are going to be very, very significantly impacted by what happens to mean sea levels. And if there is one robust scientific conclusion that can be reached after 20 years of research on climate change, the one thing on which there is no controversy is the rise in mean sea levels. The third area of vulnerability is what happens to water security from the melting of the glaciers. And if you include Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, we're talking of a population of almost 1 billion people who are going to be dependent on or influenced by what is going to happen to the health of the Himalayan glaciers and the runoff into the rivers that depend on these glaciers. The fourth dimension of vulnerability for India comes from the confluence of her great mineral wealth with her significant forest cover. If you look at the map of India, and if you plot the areas of mineral wealth, particularly coal, iron ore, and you see where the forest areas are, there's a one-to-one mapping. So the more coal you're going to use, the more iron ore you're going to use, the more forests you're going to destroy. And the more forests you're going to destroy, the more you're going to contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. So we're looking at 4 regions of India: the Himalayan ecosystem, the Western Ghats, the coastal zone, and the Northeast. The Northeast is very important because about 25% of our forest area is concentrated in that region. After having assessed the vulnerability, after having assessed what the impact is going to be, what are the interventions? What do you need to do in agriculture, in water, in different sectors of the economy? So that is very important, and I think that is really where we need to build close partnerships between the government and civil society organizations. Adaptation to climate change cannot be a government mandated process. It has to be a community driven process. Elected panchayats, women's self-help groups, various social organizations have to be involved. The booklet that I have just released today is very significant. The management of agro-biodiversity, a number of initiatives that have been identified here are all things that needs to be done at the community level. We need to de-link what we do from international negotiations. We need to ask ourselves the question, what is in our interest, and mount the appropriate response. What we negotiate and how we negotiate for international commitments is an entirely separate issue. But what we do domestically is far more significant and far more important.